The forgotten siege of Port Hudson, the siege that split the South. What if I told you that one of the most important battles of the Civil War didn't happen at Gettysburg or Antietam, but in a mosquito-infested fortress carved into the Louisiana bluffs? What if the fate of the Confederacy hinged not on a grand cavalry charge, but on a politician in uniform who couldn't read a battlefield map without squinting? How did a former vice president of the United States end up leading rebel troops in a failed assault on Baton Rouge? Why did a cautious Union general wait so long to attack that his enemy had time to dig trenches deep enough to bury regrets? And what made thousands of soldiers, black and white, fight through heat, hunger, and hopelessness for a cause that was still defining itself? This is not just the story of a siege. It's the story of Port Hudson, where politics met gunpowder, where valor defied prejudice, and where the Mississippi River finally flowed, unvexed, to the sea. So grab your kepi, lace up your boots, and prepare to march through the mud, the madness, and the moments that made history. From the moment the first cannon fired on Fort Sumter in April 1861, both Union and Confederate strategists knew one thing: control the Mississippi River, and you control the war. The river was the spine of America, carrying troops, supplies, and hope. The Union's Anaconda Plan aimed to choke the Confederacy by seizing the river and splitting the South in half. By mid-1862, the Union had made stunning progress. New Orleans had fallen to Admiral David Farragut. Memphis was occupied, but two Confederate fortresses remained: Vicksburg in Mississippi and Port Hudson in Louisiana. Port Hudson sat like a sentinel on a bend of the Mississippi River, just north of Baton Rouge. The terrain was a military engineer's dream, or nightmare, depending on which side you were on. The bluffs rose steeply above the river, offering commanding views and perfect artillery positions. Dense forests, tangled ravines, and swampy lowlands surrounded the area, making it nearly impossible to approach undetected or unscathed. But it wasn't just about elevation, it was about location. Port Hudson guarded the mouth of the Red River, the Confederacy's vital supply artery from Texas and Arkansas. Cotton, cattle, and gunpowder flowed through this route. Lose Port Hudson, and the Western Confederacy was cut off like a gangrenous limb. Before he was a Confederate general, John Cable Breckinridge was the 14th Vice President of the United States, serving under James Buchanan. Born in Lexington, Kentucky, into a family steeped in law and politics, Breckinridge was the youngest vice president in American history, just 36 when he took office. He was eloquent, ambitious, and deeply Southern in sentiment. After losing the 1860 presidential election to Abraham Lincoln as the Southern Democratic candidate, Breckinridge tried to hold the Union together, but when Kentucky wavered, he didn't. He joined the Confederacy, was expelled from the U.S. Senate, and commissioned a major general. His military career was a mixed bag. He fought at Shiloh, Stones River, and Chickamauga. He was accused of drunkenness during key defeats. He later served as Confederate Secretary of War, fleeing to England after the collapse of the Confederacy. But in August 1862, Breckinridge was tasked with retaking Baton Rouge, which had fallen to Union forces. He led 4,000 troops from Vicksburg to Camp Moore, joined by Brigadier General Daniel Ruggles and his 1,500 men. On August 5, 1862, Breckinridge attacked Baton Rouge. His troops pushed Union forces back through the city, and fierce fighting erupted near Magnolia Cemetery. But the Confederate ironclad CSS Arkansas, meant to support the attack, broke down just 4 miles from the city. Without naval support, Breckinridge couldn't hold his gains. Union gunboats shelled his troops, and he was forced to retreat. It was a bitter failure. "We were within an inch of victory," Breckinridge later lamented, "and then the river betrayed us." He left behind General Daniel Ruggles, a Massachusetts-born Confederate who had turned his back on Yankee roots and married into a Virginia family. Ruggles, a veteran of the Mexican-American War and the Battle of Shiloh, was tasked with fortifying Port Hudson. But the man who truly transformed Port Hudson into a fortress was Major General Franklin Gardner. Born in New York City in 1823, Gardner was the son of LaColle Charles Kitchell Gardner, a Revolutionary War descendant, and Anne Eliza McLean, a Louisiana native from a wealthy plantation family. He graduated from West Point in 1843. Ulysses S. Grant was in the same class. Gardner served in the Mexican-American War, earning brevet promotions for bravery at Monterrey, Churubusco, and Molino del Rey. He later served in the Utah War and was stationed across the U.S. But when the Civil War broke out, he sided with his wife's family, Marie Celeste Mouton, daughter of Louisiana Governor Alexander Mouton. Gardner's ties to Louisiana were deep. His brother-in-law, Alfred Mouton, was also a Confederate general. Gardner knew the terrain, the politics, and the people. He was a gifted engineer, but not a flashy commander. He was methodical, quiet, and stubborn as a mule in a mudslide. Gardner arrived at Port Hudson on December 27, 1862, replacing Brigadier General William N.R. Beale. He immediately began transforming the site. Earthworks were dug into the bluffs. Artillery batteries were positioned to control river traffic. Bomb-proof shelters, trench networks, and redoubts were built. The defenses stretched for 4 miles, forming a crescent around the river bend. Gardner's goal was simple: make Port Hudson impregnable. And for a time, it was. Nathaniel Prentice Banks was born in Waltham, Massachusetts, in 1816, the son of a mill foreman. He dropped out of school at 14 to work in a cotton mill, earning the nickname Bobbin Boy, a moniker that stuck with him even as he climbed the political ladder. He later worked in a customs house, edited a newspaper, and studied law. By 23, he was admitted to the bar and had begun his political ascent. Banks was a man of sharp suits, sharper speeches, and a knack for winning elections. He served as Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, then as Governor of Massachusetts, and was a rising star in the Republican Party. But when the Civil War broke out, he traded his podium for a sword, though he never quite learned how to swing it. Before Banks arrived in Louisiana, the Union command there was held by Major General Benjamin Butler. A man so controversial he made enemies faster than he made decisions. Butler was known for his iron-fisted rule in New Orleans, his confiscation of Confederate property, and his infamous woman order, which threatened to treat any woman insulting Union soldiers as a prostitute. Lincoln, needing someone with more political finesse and less scandal, replaced Butler with Banks in December 1862. Banks had no formal military training, but he had the one thing Lincoln valued: loyalty. Banks arrived in Louisiana with orders to capture Port Hudson and then marched to Vicksburg to support Ulysses S. Grant. But Banks had a problem. He was cautious to a fault. He preferred committee meetings to cavalry charges, and his battlefield instincts were more bureaucratic than bold. On May 11, 1863, Banks received word that Confederate reinforcements had been pulled from Port Hudson to support Vicksburg. It was the opening he needed. He moved, but not fast enough. By the time Nathaniel P. Banks had surrounded Port Hudson on May 21, 1863, he had the numbers, the artillery, and the strategic advantage. But what he lacked, fatally, was urgency. Banks, ever the cautious politician turned general, delayed his assault for nearly a week. He wanted to organize his forces, draw up maps, and rehearse maneuvers. Meanwhile, Confederate General Franklin Gardner, holed up with just 7,500 men, used every minute of that delay to reinforce his lines, dig deeper trenches, and position artillery like a man preparing for the apocalypse. When Banks finally attacked on May 27th, it was a bloodbath. The terrain was a nightmare: dense woods, steep ravines, and swampy lowlands. The Union assaults were uncoordinated, and Gardner's men were dug in like ticks on a hound. The result? Thousands of Union casualties. Men died in waves, many never even reaching the Confederate lines. And yet, Banks tried again on June 13 to 14 with similar results. Gardner refused to surrender. "I was ordered to hold Port Hudson," Gardner later said, "and I did. But at what cost? The attacks were uncoordinated, units moved without synchronization. The terrain was dense and unforgiving, thick woods, ravines, and swamps. The defenders were dug in and determined. Gardner's men fought like cornered wolves." Among the Union attackers were the 1st and 3rd Louisiana Native Guard, African-American regiments composed of freedmen and formerly enslaved men from New Orleans. These were some of the first black combat troops in U.S. history. Their story is extraordinary. Many had served in the Confederate militia before switching sides. They were poorly equipped, often with outdated weapons and minimal training. They faced racism from their own commanders, who doubted their courage. But on May 27th, they proved their mettle. Charging uphill under fire, they fought with ferocity and discipline, earning praise even from skeptical officers. They advanced with a steadiness that would have done credit to veterans, one Union colonel wrote. Their bravery helped pave the way for the broader enlistment of black soldiers in the Union Army. The siege lasted 48 days, the longest in American history. Union soldiers suffered from heat stroke, dysentery, and constant sniper fire. Confederate troops, starving and cut off, boiled shoe leather for soup and drank from muddy puddles. Banks' delay cost lives. Gardner's refusal to surrender earlier prolonged suffering. The siege exposed the horrors of war, not just in the trenches, but in the decisions made far from the battlefield. And yet, through it all, the soldiers, black and white, North and South, fought with remarkable resilience. The 1st and 3rd Louisiana Native Guard, African-American regiments from New Orleans, charged into battle despite prejudice and poor equipment. Their valor helped pave the way for the broader enlistment of black troops in the Union Army. On July 4, 1863, Ulysses S. Grant captured Vicksburg, the Confederate fortress upriver. The Mississippi was nearly Union blue. Gardner, now isolated, surrendered Port Hudson on July 9th. With that, the Union had split the Confederacy in two. The Trans-Mississippi region, Texas, Arkansas, and western Louisiana, was cut off. The South's ability to move troops and supplies was crippled. The Mississippi flows unvexed to the sea, Lincoln said. And with Port Hudson's fall, it did. Today, Port Hudson is a quiet place, a historic site nestled in the woods of East Baton Rouge Parish, Louisiana. Visitors walk the trails, read the plaques, and try to imagine the thunder of cannon fire and the cries of wounded men. It may not have the fame of Gettysburg or Antietam, but its impact was seismic. It was the final domino in the Union's River Campaign, the moment the Confederacy was cleaved in two. It was also a place of transformation, where African-American soldiers proved their courage, where generals learned the cost of hesitation, and where the river itself became a symbol of freedom.